Hello and welcome to the Magic Mirror podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Con the Trinket Mage. And with me is my co-host, 33 Elk.
Hello.
How are you doing, Elk? I heard you moved recently.
Yeah, moved and I got my stuff early, so I'm actually here this week as opposed to not being here this week. Very exciting.
And my other co-host is Salubrious Snail.
Hello.
I heard you didn't move recently.
Yeah, I heard you were stationary recently.
I actually just took a nap, so very stationary.
We have a fun episode this week. We've decided to rank all of the color combinations in terms of how much we like them in EDH. This podcast is sponsored by Card Castle, the easy way to sort your collection digitally. If you click our link in the description, you can get 1 free month of premium and start scanning your cards today. Thanks to Card Castle for sponsoring the podcast.
Right.
Before we get into our main topic, Elk, I believe you wanted to shout something out?
Yeah, so as previously mentioned, I moved recently. If you live in Denver, if you want to play Magic with me, if you particularly like soft pretzels and hot chocolate, I've been hired on by Elysium Cafe and Games as their social media and event manager of sorts. Friday, 6 p.m. is Commander Night there, but they also have Warhammer, miniature painting, Smash Ultimate tournaments hosted by local Smash legend Smirk. Tuesday draft nights, and even board game rentals if you're not able to make it to Friday Night Magic. I'm also in the works to helping them get into buying and selling singles soon. So, hey, if you're in the Lakewood area of Denver, check out their website, elysium.games, for more info. I hope to see you there. Con will have a picture of the game store to throw up there. It's a huge space. Guys, okay, so yeah, no, I like I said, I do work for these people, but also just like editorially, like outside of like a little ad read blurb shout out, this place is huge. The food's decent, like amazing, great. Like already you can like stop here without needing to get dinner. And then, but like it was barren for Commander Night. There was like no people there. It was so sad. This place has so much potential. Legitimately, they couldn't get 2 pods of Commander to fire. And look at the space of this like zone. It's huge. So there's definitely room for growth here. I'm very excited to be working here. It's a brand new location. Very exciting.
I also wanted to give a quick shout out to one of my patrons who made some fan art. If you make any fan art, you can tweet at us on Twitter, links in the description, or blue sky us at Blue Sky. Elk and I are on both of those. I'll put a link to everything in the description. If you just want to tweet at us anything you make, that'd be really cool. So there's a few things that we want to clarify with this tier list. One, we're focusing on EDH here. Totally different if we were talking about a different format. 2, these are based on how fun they are, in our opinion, not a power level ranking.
Oh yeah, no. I also imagine that we are going to have similar but like very slightly different grading criteria. Like I think we kind of like exchanged like our own personal ideas about how we're grading them, and they're fairly close, but they might be
generally ranked by fun, diversity of color identity, stuff like that, or of commander choice rather.
I'm a big vibes guy, so how a color identity feels is very big for me, and I think I think you two have both mentioned that as well. So that fun diversity all are going to be wrapped up in this.
Yes, and because it's a very opinionated list, I need to tell you as the audience, if you have a differing opinion than us, that's totally fine. Put it in the comments. Curious, as to what you think. There's no wrong answers here. And to be very clear, though, I'm only extending that to the audience. You two have very wrong answers. It's crazy.
No, that's fair. I accept that.
Our tiers, by the way, are S to D. There's no F tier because, there's nothing you shouldn't play.
These are just colors, people. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Starting with mono white. I placed it in A tier, Elk placed it in S tier, and Snail placed mono white in A tier. So not a lot of deviation here.
Yeah, I think if we made this podcast like 4, 5, maybe 6 years ago, mono white would be like C, D tier. But mono white's been getting the love in the past half decade or so. Like they are printing cards for mono white, and there's no shortage of like awesome things you can do in this color. Flying, auras, flicker, Angels, like, if we want to get more into the creature types, like tokens, like there's so much you can do in mono white. Even now we're starting to get small power theme cards with things like Delny, right? So mono white is honestly, I think, probably the most diverse monocolor.
Yeah, mono white's I think definitely the most interesting of the monocolors at this point. It's got, I think the one area of critique I might have for it is that it's kind of draw and some other packages might be a little bit limited, and so people might end up running a lot of the same cards. But beyond that, I think it's very interesting as a monocolor. Lots of different things you can do with it.
I like mono white as well. I actually enjoy it because of the lack of card draw. Since card draw is difficult to come by like unconditionally in card draw, in mono white, you have to be a little bit creative or you're forced into certain synergy things, which I do think lends it to be a little bit more interesting because you have to sort of work for it. You'll come to see on this list, I'm not a fan of color combinations that let you do everything easily. All right, moving on to mono blue. I have mono blue in A tier, Elk has mono blue in B tier, and Snail has mono blue in C tier.
Yeah, I don't hate mono blue. I don't. I certainly don't have any beef with it, but I think it's a bit more limited than some others. I think blue is one of those colors where adding a color to it really adds a lot of dimension. So the monocolor can be fun. I think there's some cool things you can do in there, but I haven't seen it be super interesting in my experience compared to other monocolors, like my two favorites.
Yeah, mono blue, it's artifacts, drawing cards, spell slinger. There's some mill in there, right, with the Bruvac players, although that's more of a combo commander than a mill commander, let's be honest. The themes of mono blue feel way more restrictive than on white. And I feel like it's mostly because blue interacts really interestingly with artifacts, but there's very few that interact with enchantments, very few that interact with a ton of creatures. So you end up getting like more instant and sorcery heavy decks, which is where blue would sort of shine more. And it feels a lot more limiting in terms of like affecting the board state, stuff like that, which I generally tend to shy away from. But still, it's a great color. I mean, blue is awesome.
I love mono blue because you can deal with anything on the stack, and as things resolve, they become significantly more difficult to deal with. And that sort of adds this like point of interest in terms of like how blue operates. Because if you go shields down and develop your board, somebody might play something that is suddenly difficult for you to deal with because you can't counter it now that's already in play. But you can technically deal with anything, in theory. And I think that makes blue very interesting to play. And you'll probably see on my list there's a lot of blue towards the top. But I feel like mono blue has a lot of really fascinating commanders. Kaho, Manama Historian, Fibblethip the Lost, Blind Seer are all really weird. And they do very different things. And I just think that's very cool. There's a lot of fun mono blue commanders. And one of my favorite decks is mono blue. So on to mono black. I put mono black in B tier. Elk put mono black in D tier. And Snail also put mono black in D tier.
I was a mono black player back in the day. That was my first EDH deck built in 2014. And that might be biasing me against it now, but I feel like every mono black deck I see is just doing the same thing that my 14-year-old self deck did. You know, like you got your mana doublers, you got your tutors, you got your flashy spells. It's just a lot of the same. You see a lot of Cabal Coffers when you're playing against black. You see a lot of tutors. I personally don't like unconditional tutors very much, so I find just seeing a lot of those really bland. So yeah, I just don't like mono black. I don't think it's bringing a whole lot of interesting gameplay, and I think can usually know what to expect when I see a mono black deck, and I don't like that.
Yep. Bingo. Same thing here. I actually started on black. I still play a lot of black in my decks. I still have a mono black deck as sort of like a dessert deck, so to speak. Iara, First of Locthwain, very uninteresting deck. It's mostly just there to do Grey Merchant of Asphodel stuff. But yeah, generally speaking, mono black, there are cards that pervade all of mono black. Cabal Coffers, sometimes Cabal Stronghold, not always. You'll see the mana doublers. Like, exactly what Snail said is hitting it exactly on the head. A lot of mono black decks just do the same thing. This being said, of course, there's always exceptions to the rule. There's some interesting mono black commanders in the rough there that aren't quite just Cabal Coffer, Value Piles, Gray Merchant of Asphodel type things. But these are not the majority of mono black decks. So I'm also putting it in D tier. Not because I don't find these play patterns fun or anything. It's just that the diversity of the color is very limited because there's so many staples for mono black.
I put mono black in B, and it was actually going to be A tier for me, but I actually bumped it down because I think it's a little too powerful in terms of, unlike mono red or mono blue, where you struggle to deal with certain types of things. I actually don't think mono black struggles nearly that much. Like, I know a lot of people will say, oh, what happens if I get hit by a Rest in Peace? I'm like, I don't know, Oblivion Stone, Hell Vault, is that the other one? There's lots of artifacts that just, like, can clear things out for you. You could boom pile it. It doesn't really matter. Like, you have tons of options.
Yeah, even Rest in Peace it can be hit by Feed the Swarm and now Withering Torment, right? We got 2 enchantment removal cards for mono black. It's artifacts.
Yes. Yeah, which also, O-Stone, boom pile can, like, clear those away.
Exactly.
So I think mono black is just kind of, it can do anything, which does make it kind of a little too powerful and a little unrestricted. So it doesn't feel like a monocolor to me because you can kind of do whatever you want. But not to mention discard. A lot of people sleep on that, but forcing your opponents to, like, discard can make it harder for them to cast the spells that will mess you up. Maybe I just build mono black decks, like, differently. I do agree that, like, a lot of mono black can have, like, Cabal Coffers into Torment of Hailfire, and it's kind of like a snooze fest. But I don't know. I like a lot of mono black commanders. I like Toshiro. I think he's very unique. I like Marilyn of the Morn Song, another weird card. I don't know. I feel like whenever I see mono black Iname Death Aspect, like, there's a lot of cool stuff here. I do agree that it can be a little boring with, like, aristocrats and crap, but, you know.
If I think of the right Marilyn of the Morn Song, that's not actually interesting. Come on. Like, in theory, like, looking at the card for the first time, it looks interesting, but I feel like the way most people play it probably isn't, right?
Six mana Ob Nixilis, the one that, like, nukes someone for 10 life and makes them sacrifice a creature when they tutor. Now that's an interesting mono black commander. You can put Marlin in the 99 of that one.
Wait, what's wrong with Marlin of the Morn Song?
It's just a combo commander. You just get Opposition Agent. It's just a 2-card combo. It's like calling Bruvac an interesting deck, even though it's a 2-card combo.
Just don't put Opposition Agent in your deck. Like, this is such a nothing, like, argument. Like, you can make a 2-card combo with, like, 50 billion different commanders. Like, who cares?
Yeah, but
if you don't want to win that way, just don't put it in your deck.
This is also part of, like, what makes mono black kind of low on my tier list, despite me liking mono black's, like, play patterns, is because you can just put Cabal Coffers in almost any mono black deck, and it's not a drawback or anything. It's just good.
Next is mono red. I put mono red at A tier. Elk put mono red at C tier, and Snail put mono red at also C tier.
I just wanted to say that I put it at C tier. I think thinking hard about it, I put it at B tier. I think it's a little bit more interesting than I had given it credit for when I was making my list. I think it's really interesting to have colors that don't have a whole lot of hard removal. I think forcing a player to use more damage-based removal is really fun. I think it's kind of cool to need to, like, coordinate damage amounts and figure out how to get rid of things. And then I think red's card advantage and the fact that it's a lot of, like, looting, a lot of impulse draw, I think that's pretty dynamic and cool as well. So I like that about it, and I think you can take the color in a decent amount of cool ways.
Yeah, I know. I actually agree. I really do enjoy red as a color. This being said, the diversity of how mono red decks typically win leaves something to kind of be desired for me. When it comes to mono red decks, it is, I mean, I guess to its credit, it is just like burning people down, which is, you know, fair. That is what the color does. But when it comes to mono red, I'm having trouble thinking of a time that I haven't been killed by, like, an impact tremors effect. Like, that just feels like the way that they kill you.
You never played against, like, Doretti Reanimator?
No, hardly. I know there's artifact decks around. I'm a big fan of those. I like Feldon, right? But these feel more like the exception rather than the rule of mono red gaming.
It's like a lot of damage amplifiers, a lot of, like, insurrection type effects. A lot of
Yeah.
insurrection specifically.
And don't get started with Elk. What about chaos? I don't want to play with you, and that's fine. No, but like I said, I enjoy mono red as a color. There's fun play patterns here. It's just that the play patterns, in my opinion, are not that varied. I'm happy to hear otherwise in the comments. But generally, I think the more interesting mono red commanders are the exception rather than the rule.
I adore mono red. I think it's so cool. There are so many awesome, weird, cool commanders. So I do agree. There's like you can play your like Tor brands and stuff, the damage amplification, burn, blah blah blah. But you can play Duretti and build artifacts. You can play Feldon of the Third Path, who's just you don't even need to build him as an artifact commander. He's just Reanimator. Perforos is Bronze Blooded is almost Reanimator. It's like sneak attack in the command zone. So those are like Reanimator-esque ones, artifact decks. You can play. One of my favorite things is there's multiple politics and goad commanders, which are really sweet. Dai Chan, Artful Beauty, is a really phenomenal politics commander that lets you do all sorts of like weird, cool things. There's a lot of old red cards that are very strange, like Ben Aki Hermit and like Forced Combats, playing at instant speed. There's so many strange cards that are, if you like go down, that it just makes mono red so fun to brew around. That said, I've never been tempted to build a Tor brand deck because I don't think it's very interesting. I agree with you guys, but man, I feel like once you scroll down a little bit and you play like Jaxis or something, you can do some really cool things. We're moving on to mono green. I have mono green in D tier. Elk has mono green in C tier, and Snail has mono green in B tier.
Yeah, I like mono green, and I might have even had it in A tier a while back, but I think the draw has gotten less interesting. What's the one that was from the Ravnica set? Something Project.
Guardian Project.
Guardian Project. I think
also from Ravnica, Beast Whisperer.
Yeah, the more and more effects we've gotten like that, I think the less interesting green has gotten as a color. Just 'cause I find that type of draw relatively uninteresting. But there's still a lot of other cool card draw options that I think you would have been forced to rely on more back in the day. Your ones that draw equal to damage dealt or power or that sort of thing. And then, yeah, I also just like green. Mono green is very limiting in some cool ways, and I like it, I think, for similar reasons as Trinket Mage likes a couple of other monocolors, just because I think the limits are cool and they make the color interesting, and the fact that you only have green to work with, I think, is kind of fun.
Yeah, I think mono green is it's actually decently diverse. It's way more diverse than mono black is, in my opinion. And you might think, oh, the big dumb creature color. Yes, mono green can ramp into some pretty big dumb creatures, and yes, there's a lot of elf ball as well mixed in there. But there's also counter synergy. I think Rishkar Pia Remigade is a very underplayed commander. He makes all of your creatures with counters into dorks. That card's really cool, and no one ever plays it. I haven't seen it at all. And I feel like it's actually very strong. You have auras with Gargos, Vicious Watcher, right? Like targeting Gargos with auras and having it fight people. Amazing. Yeah, so like there's a variety of different things. My mono green deck is lands, a la Legacy, not like Landfall. So I'm making Merit Lage and stuff like that. These are a wide swath of strategies that I would be personally interested in that are at home in green. And funnily enough, I think green is like the best card draw color, which you wouldn't think on the like on the face of it. But things like Life's Legacy and Momentous Fall, these things that let you sacrifice a creature and then draw cards equal to its power, or even better, Rishkar's Expertise, right? Draw cards equal to a creature's power. You'll just have 20 power creatures in green and just draw 20 cards. And like, that's just what green does. I mean, I think green is very resilient as well. It's tons of ramp, tons of advantage. You can always just vomit out a new board when your previous one gets cleared. It does everything, and it still has its weaknesses and moments of needing to think about things versus, black, where it's just like, oh gosh, I'll just slam a Patriarch's Bidding, reanimate my whole board, pass after a board clear, what have you. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of depth to green that people don't really give it credit for.
Yeah, and I am not going to give it any credit for that. I think my reasoning is the exact opposite of snails. I don't think mono green is very restrictive, and I think it's like easy baby mode. For lack of a better term, it's so phenomenally powerful. If I cast Soul Ring, Mana Vault, Mox Diamond, Chrome Mox, everybody goes, "Whoa, this is crazy! He's going insane. We got to blow up all of his mana rocks." But if I go like Exploration into Kodama's Reach, into Skyshroud Claim, into Cultivate, people go, he's ramping. I guess he'll play something big, and they're not allowed to stop me from ramping, which makes it like every color can ramp equally hard because of these powerful artifacts, but green is allowed to ramp that hard for budget reasons, and also you're not allowed to blow up lands, so you can do the unrestricted ramp. And then, what is green like unable to do? Fight spells will destroy most creatures. You also just have things like Beast Within, Song of the Dryad to get rid of anything if you really want. Artifact and enchantment removal, the best in the game, basically. Berserk is like Swords to Plowshares and mono green. It's crazy. You have some of the best card draw. Your restriction is you have to play creatures. Big whoop. You have the best card draw, some of the best removal. It's so phenomenally powerful. And one thing that I look at is like unique, interesting, cool commanders. And when I look at some of the old school, like unique green commanders, like Dose into the Falling Leaf or Hua Tao, Honored Physician, they do unique effects that are very cool because of that. And I love both of those commanders, but they do service playing big creatures, So a lot of it is like different ways to play big creatures, and I don't see as many other unique themes. There's a few cool things like Kosei Patient Warlord, love that dude, but otherwise it's just like you have all the best cards, and you want to talk unrestricted tutors. Oh, the creature tutors in green are phenomenal, and creatures do everything. So you basically have unrestricted tutors anyway.
I mean, a lot of that just feels like beef with green as a color rather than mono green. Like, the land ramp easy mode. Like, yeah, that's kind of how the game works.
Oh god, the artifact player hates green. Who could have guessed it?
It's not really specific to mono green.
There's going to be a lot of green color combos that don't rank very highly on my list.
I mean, I think a lot of that is true-ish. Although you did mention fight spells, and I think that's a way more interesting type of removal than most things in other colors. Like, I want people to be forced to play more fight spells. I wish. I mean, Wizards does seem to be putting more green removal that isn't fight spells, but I want people to play more fight spells. Come on, they're fun.
I love fight spells. I love fight spells with Death Touch. I think that's so funny. Gosh, I love green.
Yes, on to everybody's favorite. No color. I put colorless in C tier. Elk put colorless in D tier, and Snail also put colorless in C tier.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about it. Like, it's a fun restriction, but like I think it's a little too much of a restriction. I think a lot of colorless decks look very similar to each other as a result. So
it's a color devoid of options. See what I did there?
Cool that you did that, but whatever. I don't
know. Anyway, yeah, colorless. It's gotten better over time, but generally speaking, you're gonna run the same, like maybe about like 40 to 60% of the same cards that another color runs. I do like that you get to do like all utility lands. That's funny. Maybe one day colorless will be good enough and Void Mirror will get banned from Commander. Void Mirror counters any spell that colored mana was not spent to cast. So if you're in an all colorless deck without Yavimaya or Urborg in your mana base, which you should put in there just in case you see a Void Mirror, then then you can't cast spells for the rest of the game. Anyway, long story short, colorless, kind of too devoid of options currently to be even really considered a color in my eyes. It's been getting better. It'll get better one day. Give it another decade and it'll be like an actual color.
So a quick side note, I have colorless pulled up on EDH Rec. Why do I see Chaos Orb partnered with Chaos Orb as a deck option?
I saw that too, and I don't even know.
Okay, cool. Interesting. It leads to a 4/4 page, right? I put colorless in C tier just because it's so restrictive. I think it's kind of a fun challenge to try and build a colorless deck and go, how do I, deal with this, deal with that, or, do this, do that within my deck. But it's not going to be higher than C tier because a lot of the solutions, like Elk alluded to, is kind of the same. Like, how do I destroy enchantments? Oblivion Stone. So maybe when colorless gets a few more varied options, then the decks will be a little bit more diverse. I think it could be really fun. But for now, it's C tier. Okay, next up is Azorius. I have Azorius in B tier. Elk has Azorius in D tier. And Snail has Azorius in C tier.
Yeah, I think Azorius can be interesting in theory, and I think, presented as a new Magic player, like, ooh, it's the color of Order, it's the color of, I think it has a pretty clear identity. In EDH, I feel like it really doesn't have much of an identity at all. There's just not a lot of cohesion. Like, I guess there's like the flicker packages that are like, you got some stuff there, but it just feels like there's really not much going on with the color combo aside from that. And it just, like, when I scroll down the different Azorius commanders, it just feels like disjointed. There's no common line between them exactly.
Yeah, for me, flicker namely comes to mind when I hear Azorius, and I think like 20-minute turns, and then I zone out. I like that there's like a little hint, a wisp of like another theme for Azorius and Wilds of Eldraine with Hilda of the Icy Crown, all this like tapping synergy stuff. There's like Rona and the Geist, I forgot their names and even their exact effects, but they also have to do with tapping. I like some of the reanimator like sort of things, like there's Niambi, Esteemed Speaker or whatever, that like legendary reanimation. There's some like exceptions like this, but once again, these are not the rule of Azorius. It feels like every Azorius commander is flicker, and it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, I agree. I like control. I don't mind flicker that much. It's kind of boring, but it's the best color pair for it. And there are some neat commanders. Noyandar is really fun. Vega the Watcher is pretty interesting. Guafa Hazid is a really fun politics commander. I like politics. I like the stuff that the colors do. But other than that, there's nothing like crazy that jumps out at me. I'll build an Azorius deck every once in a while and have fun, but it gets scrapped quickly. Moving on to Dimir. I have Dimir in S tier. Elk has Dimir in C tier. And Snail has Dimir in B tier.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dimir, those are both colors that I quite like. And I think it's got a decent cohesion to it. You've got a lot of evasion and a lot of graveyard stuff. Those are both archetypes I really like in EDH. At the end of the day, I think it does start to kind of run out of game plans, though. I think just in that color identity, it's missing a little bit of kind of panache and punch that I think some other color identities have. So I think for that reason, feels a little bit bland, but I do like what's there, and I like those colors, so it gets a B tier for me.
Yeah, I'm slightly lower on Dimir. It feels like, yes, it does have a lot of graveyard stuff. It has a lot of evasion, like Snail said. The thing is that I feel like Dimir very quickly falls off a cliff in casual when it comes to ending the game. Of course, in CEDH, you have Thoracle combo, the strongest combo, basically bar none in CEDH. But what I am talking about here is like, my ninjas deck, I'm pecking you. I don't run Yuriko because I'm a hipster or whatever. It's like, yeah, I'm getting paper cuts. That's what it feels like playing against Dimir. The fairy impact tremor commander, I forgot her name, Obira. Whenever a fairy enters under your control, each opponent loses one life. Paper cuts. It's like, oh my god, just kill me with something, please. But no, generally speaking, Dimir is just, it has a lot of cool synergy and stuff, but it just doesn't close the game out, and that's something that like kind of leaves me a little bummed, and it feels like a little devoid of identity, kind of, and it doesn't interact in the graveyard the same way that a lot of other colors do and whatnot. I don't know, it's just strange, the color combo to me. Something feels off about it. I got the ick.
I love Dimir. I think it's super fun. I think that there's a huge diversity of, like, I'm just looking at the top commanders on EDH, right? We got ninjas, zombies, horrors, different typal things. But then there's like multiple goad commanders, control, mill, theft. You can do reanimator. You can do cheating out big spells, Spellslinger itself. There's like all these different options, and then aristocrats you can also do. You can do -1/-1 counters if you really want with like skeleton ships. Some of the old school commanders are pretty wacky. You could do blink. There's multiple commanders for that as well. I really like Dimir. There's a lot of fun stuff here, and I love that the two colors are both bad at dealing with artifacts and somewhat enchantments. And I think that the fact that they don't have synergy is cool because you have all these like new options, but you're still struggling with some of the same like restrictiveness that the colors have individually, which I think is very fun. Okay, moving on to Rakdos. I have Rakdos in S tier. Elk has Rakdos in B, and Snail also has Rakdos in S tier.
Rakdos is amazing to me. I love it. It is crystal clear identity of, everybody's getting smashed, me included. Didn't think about my wording there, but everybody is getting pasted into the floor with these hands, but even what I like about a color identity is when it has a very crystal clear identity, but then it fans out from that. You've got a bunch of different ways you can do Rakdos. They all have kind of this like biting, attrition, aggressive bent to them, but they're different. You can go bigger creatures with Rakdos Lord of Riots. There are a whole bunch of others for smaller creatures. There are some others that focus more on like control, dealing with opposing stuff. So yeah, this one's just clear to me, and I think, one of my favorite decks that I recently built, the Malfagor deck, is Rakdos, and I feel like it encapsulates what I love about the color so much, just like the kind of reckless brutality of it.
I think Rakdos is very fun, and I feel like not a lot of people play it that way. I'm guilty of this. I play Judith Aristocrats. I'm I'm a member of the boring Rakdos deck club, right? But the thing with me is I do like the savageness of Rakdos, like you mentioned. I think it has a very clear identity, and then I feel like the homogeneity because of that identity is like very high in Rakdos. I feel like you see a lot of treasure generation, stuff like this, where I don't know. If I see one more Rakdos treasures deck, I'm gonna snap. There's so much the color can do, and yet I don't see it always live up to that potential. Yeah, no, I like the aggressiveness of Rakdos. I feel like it's one of the few colors that do it. I feel like there are color combos that do it better though, and we'll get into that later.
Rakdos does it all. It does it all. Oh my goodness, you got Spellslinger, you get Burn. There are artifact decks, not just Prosper Treasures, but you get like Imskir, Iron Eater. You can go Stacks, you can go Group Slug, you can go Group Hug, you can Goad, you can play Storm. I know we're talking about casual EDH, but Ob Nixilis, Captive Kingpin, is a really cool CEDH Storm deck that is so fun to play and so fun to watch pop off. It just does everything. And the same thing that I'll say about Dimir, it just struggles against like enchantments a little bit. And I love that red and black don't cover each other's weaknesses super well. So you still gotta like work a little bit to deal with certain things. Next is Gruul. I put Gruul in C tier. Elk put Gruul in B tier. Man, I'm losing. Oh, Snail put Gruul in A tier.
You weren't expecting it up there?
No, I was not.
Oh yeah, Gruul is, I think, for similar reasons as Rakdos, it has this very clear identity of being kind of big stuff smash, but within that you've got this awesome range of different gameplay options. I think even greater than Rakdos. You can do control with it, you can do aggro with it, you can do mid-range with it, you can do, all sorts of combo decks with it, you can do graveyard things with it, you can do token things with it, you can just do all sorts of stuff with Gruul, but they all have kind of this like beat down vibe to them. This going big, going tall smackdown, and I love that about it.
So what made you put Gruul less than Rakdos then?
I like the vibe a bit less. I think Rakdos' vibe has a special place for me, and Gruul's vibe is a little bit more generic, but I still like it.
I love Gruul. Gruul's great. I like the swaths of different things that it dips into. You have artifact decks in Gruul, a lot of them actually. You think of Gruul as like Gruul Smash, creatures, giant things. There's a ton of nuance with artifact decks in this color combo that I love. Yeah, Roxanne, Maria, Kibo. There's a couple others, but they're escaping my mind. Tons of cool artifact decks. I'm a big fan, especially with Gruul, when it comes to lands. I love Borborygmos Enraged. I named it right for the Pithing Needle. Just like lands turning into lightning bolts. I think my favorite thing about Gruul by far is the fact that it actually closes out games after getting an advantage. It feels like a lot of colors can dirtle. Dimir can dirtle, and Gruul's not one of them. If they get ahead, they will win. And I appreciate that a lot for a color combo to like make a nice, short, concise game with a bunch of power plays. And Gruul does that very well.
Even though I have a Gruul deck that I love and adore, I still put it in C tier, similar for reasons in mono green. It's kind of really powerful, like a very, very strong color combination. I think the commanders are more interesting and diverse than mono green, which is why I bumped it up a tier. But I feel like a lot of the benefits you gain when a Gruul commander requests something of you, the benefit you gain is very often power on board or mana, and it's less of anything else, which I feel like makes them a little bit more narrow in terms of the way they feel, or at least how I feel building about them. Like a Tarkar World Vendor wants you to play dragons, it gives their dragons double strike, so it's more damage, a lot of that type of stuff. Moving on to Selesnya. I put it in D tier, and actually I rated this at the bottom of D tier. It's my lowest ranked color combination. Elk put Selesnya in D tier, and Snail put Selesnya in C tier.
Wow, we're all Selesnya haters. Yeah, I don't despise Selesnya, but it's just missing the sauce for me. I think you see identities that are around tokens or auras, and there's like some sense of cohesion, but I find that the game plans are usually just a little bit bland, and I find that adding a third color can make those two colors more interesting. And I think that a lot of the kind of builds for Selesnya tend to be a little bit limiting in practice and end up kind of one-dimensional.
Yeah, can I interest you in life gain, counters, creature tokens, or enchantments? And then that's like the end of what Selesnya does. It's like it does 4 things. Somehow Selesnya has taken all the interesting things that white does and all the interesting things that green does and stripped them out of the colors. Together, these colors are more boring than they are apart, which is amazing to me. I didn't realize that was possible until Selesnya. I was scrolling through and it was like, wow, yeah, no, it did not get better when these two were joined. This also feels like the most inconsequential color pairing. It feels like white and green overlap so heavily that like missing one or the other, you don't end up missing that much besides creature removal in green, and even then fight spells are very good. So like, I don't know. It's like apart, you don't really miss the other color when together, and it's like the least impactful color combo for that reason as well.
I agree. Mono green is already phenomenally powerful, and then allowing you to swap the fight spells with like better creature removal just makes it like incredibly powerful. And all the commanders are like snooze fests. The only cool Selesnya commander is Glunch. Don't at me.
Where on the doll did the mono green hurt you, Con?
Me? I built it. I built mono green.
Mono green destroys all the baubles, all the toys gone.
That's true. No. I played a lot of mono green, and every deck was so unbelievably overpowered. It was insane. It doesn't matter what restrictions, budget, anything I did, it was just like ramp, big thing, crush the table. It's like the easiest mono. If you want to win games in Casual Commander, oh my goodness, build mono green Stompy. It's so easy. You literally can't do it wrong. It is unbeatable in Casual Commander.
What?
It's crazy.
It's definitely good.
Is this something I'm just like a truth I'm missing as somebody who builds budget decks? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I think Land Ramp's very good in everything, but we have more colors to get to.
We do have
Fair.
more colors to get to. Maybe one day
We can proceed.
we'll talk about how mono green Omnath is literally unbeatable.
Trinket Mage in the straitjacket rocking back and forth.
Next we have Orzhov. I put Orzhov in B. Elk put Orzhov in D. Snail put Orzhov in B as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of divided on Orzhov. I find Aristocrats to be a little bit bland. I find Life Gain to be a little bit bland. But at the same time, Orzhov, I think the identity is pretty clear in a lot of cases. You know, you've got focus on small creatures, focus on life gain. And Orzhov also has some really awesome commanders. I think Liesa and Brina in particular is
I love Brina.
wonderful. And I think that's just such a good politics commander that feels great in those colors. So I think sometimes Orzhov ends up a little bit more boring in my book, but I think there's a lot of potential there, and I think the cohesion between the two colors is there.
So for me, Orzhov, like Snail alluded to, it's Aristocrats, it's Life Gain. Now, you need to understand that I love these two things quite a bit, actually. I love Orzhov play patterns, but the thing is that Orzhov deck variety is very low, in my opinion. I feel like there's a lot of overlap when it comes to the play patterns of Orzhov decks, and it sort of dampers the rating I can give it on this tier list. That being said, I mean, I the color's perfectly fine. I know I put it in D tier, but the long and short of it is the variety just isn't there. The spice is not there, even though I do enjoy the play patterns that these can produce. And once again, there are exceptions to this rule, of course, like any color. Brina, I agree, is also a very good card. I love that card so much.
I also agree that Aristocrats and Life Gain, not particularly interesting, but I do like Life Swap or Life Lost decks, which Orzhov does really well. Orzhov has a couple of cool artifact commanders. Greasefang is a really sweet, fun commander. There's also like a reasonable amount of like politics commanders and Enchantress and a few other like just kind of interesting things, like some weird Voltron options that are pretty cool. So I like Orzhov. It lets you do a lot of things. It is a little bit kind of powerful in terms of like its removal. It's very flexible, can deal with anything at any time. So because of that, I put it in B tier. But you know, if it had a few more different commanders and maybe it wasn't so strong, it'd probably be A. Next is Izzet, which I put in S tier. Elk put Izzet in D tier, and Snail put Izzet in B tier.
This is one that I felt kind of divided on because Izzet as a color identity within Magic the Gathering, it has a very clear kind of zany scientist, mad scientist cooking up instant and sorcery vibes. And so I think that it has like kind of this cool vibe to it. And I think even in EDH that translates over a bit. But I think it also sometimes feels like it's missing a little something for me. I just want a third color, one particular third color that we'll get to later. But I like it. I like it decently well. I think it's got some fun stuff for it.
Do you want artifacts or do you want instants and sorceries? This is like the only two things that Izzet does. I can't do it. Listen, I will happily play Ruby Storm all day in Modern. I love Storm. It's just like, this is Storm the color or Artifacts the color, and it does nothing else. It's devoid, and it makes me a little bit bummed out. Now, there are a couple different takes on like Izzet Storm that are in there. Like, they interact with instants and sorceries in different ways, but like, ultimately, I just can't bring myself to do it. It's just like, I love creatures too much. Izzet, I never play, basically. I do like Melik, though. Shout out to Melik. Love casting stuff from the top of my library. Very fun.
So I do disagree with Elk here. I think one, Izzet is like the Spellslinger color, but it does it in so many different ways, and that's what is part of what makes it interesting. If you want, Magecraft-like effects, you go with Varen, you things that trigger things. If you want to cast, spend a lot of mana on non-creature spells, you play Ovika. If you want to cast cantrips to draw cards, you play Locust God. If you want to play Control, you play the newest version of Melik. Each different Spellslinger commander asks you to do something very different. Like Agar the Freezing Flame is not the same as a Ovika enigmatic Goliath Spellslinger deck. These are very different styles of Spellslinger. So it covers the whole gambit of storm to cantrips to control. But then it's not just Spellslinger. You can play, coin flips. There are multiple coin flip commanders. You can play artifacts. There are a dozen different artifact commanders. And it's not just like Jorva is probably one of the least interesting ones. It's the most popular, right? You just play an artifact, draw a card. Yippee wahoo. The new Iron Man is a breeding. The new Iron Man is a birthing pod for artifacts. Tawanos, one of my favorite commanders of all time, doubles like triggered abilities. There's the new Malcolm that makes clues when you cast your second spell, and then you can do clue synergies. And then you don't want to do Izzet Spellslinger and you don't want to do artifacts? Fine. Multiple goad commanders. There's politics. There's like burn. You can do so many like different ways of doing it. It has like this strong identity, and it does that identity in like every single way. Even like aggro with Balmor Battle Mage Captain. I don't know. I love Izzet. This is like fits me so perfectly.
If you want an artifact birthing pod commander, I hate to break it to you, but mono white did it first. My S tier, my goat. Good old Oswald Fiddlebender.
I love Oswald. I love Oswald. Moving on to Golgari. I have Golgari in B tier. Elk has Golgari in S tier, which I was not surprised about. Snail has Golgari in B tier.
I find that Golgari fits my playstyle pretty well in terms of what it does and what it's good at. It's doing high creature counts, lots of graveyard things, lots of kind of fiddly value, but ultimately it doesn't feel that varied. It feels like everything is kind of following from that kind of simple mold, and I guess it's a little bit similar to Dimir in that way, in that it's doing the things I like, so I can't hate the color, but it does feel like it's missing a little bit of sauce.
So I wholeheartedly disagree. I think I have the same argument for Golgari that Khan has for Izzet, in that I feel like Golgari is the archetypal graveyard colors. So whereas Izzet is the archetypal Spellslinger colors and does Spellslinger in all these different varied ways, Golgari does graveyard stuff in a wide variety of different ways. So what comes to mind for me, of course, I have a Farrakha deck. Self-mill is Golgari's bread and butter. But also huge creatures, Life Drain, Gerard, go that way. If you want lands, you have Beladros Witherbloom, the Gitrog monster, a little bit of a boring, bland choice, but it's there. Then also food is another big Golgari theme, especially after Bloomburrow. But you have Ygra, and then also Guillaume, Master Chef. I don't know. So you have like that little artifact inroad there too. Delirium was in green, black heavily throughout many different sets. So there's a wide variety of card types that are in black and green, because the sub theme used to be Delirium. So you can actually build a lot of different decks. It has a lot of the things that I like about mono white, where it does a lot of things very well. If there was one color combo I had to build for the rest of my life, I think it would be Golgari, honestly. It just does so much stuff so well. And sure, it does hinge on the graveyard a lot to do all that different stuff, but that's fine. I mean, graveyard's part of the game. Let's play with it.
That's fair. Maybe I'm underrating some of the deeper down, less played Golgari commanders.
Yeah, for me, Golgari is Gruul, but more interesting. It's got the same like green problem, where I think this is like a phenomenally powerful color combination, and I feel like I can just play all the good green cards and shore it up, any missing creature removal I might have with like black, and I can just play all the same like green things. But there are a lot of really fun Golgari commanders like Yargle and Multani. What do you do with that? It's a vanilla creature. It's kind of fun. Skullbriar is a very unique card. The new Rendmaw is fun. So because of that, I like Golgari. I just think it's a lot of the commanders are a bit samey for me, so it's B tier. Okay, moving on to Boros. I have Boros in C tier. Elk has Boros in A tier. And Snail has Boros in B tier.
Boros is a color identity that I really want to like. I want to root for it. And I think I've seen some very cool Boros decks. I think it's a color pair that has potential for some very cool decks. However, I think it tends to get hung up on equipment and combat a lot of the time, and it just tends to lack a bit of depth there. So it's one that I want to see more exploration with, but so far I've not been impressed enough to give it anything above a B.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is Boros is kind of memed on as, haha, this is the equipment color combo. We get an equipment commander every set. Not so much anymore. I mean, like, we actually get a lot of very cool Boros commanders, and it's just been kind of pigeonholed into this like sort of strategy in people's minds, because there was a solid 2 years where every Boros commander was equipment. But there's a ton of interesting artifact commanders here. There's life gain. There's a lot of combat damage stuff, but like there's a lot of like hidden gems in here that are really sick. Like Tai Joaquin, perfect shot, like as a burn commander. Very interesting play patterns there, with exactly sniping your opponent's creatures to draw cards. I think consistently when doing my deck review streams for people, when building Boros commanders for myself, I am very consistently surprised with the depth that this color combo has. I've seen Boros landfall decks that are actually very good because of things like Brought Back and fetch lands and white ramp spells. There are activated abilities is a big thing in Boros. You have Argus Cause and Eartha Joe recently from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, which both copy activated abilities. There's a ton of depth in Boros. Also, Boros does the mono red copy a bunch of creature stuff better than mono red, in my opinion. There's just a lot more interesting variety of ETBs and flickering and stuff. You have aristocrats in Boros as well, you can jam a Goblin Bombardment in an Ajani deck, the Flip Ajani that we just got in Modern Horizons 3, or an Avacyn, the Flip Avacyn, Archangel Avacyn. Both these cards are really sick. Tokens, go wide theme. This is also in Boros. I mean, there's just so much that this color combo does, actually, and I think it's kind of sad that people just say, oh, it's the equipment colors, time to move on and build an actual interesting deck, because there's a lot here.
Boros, I don't mind as a color combo. I like mono red, I like mono white, I like some of the things it does together. The simple reason I have it in C tier is there is no Boros commander that interests me. I've tried playing a lot of different ones, and I just haven't found something. I don't know. All of them just kind of fall flat for me, and I really wish there were just some more interesting Boros commanders. Not that there are none, but it's just none of them call to me. I feel sad about that. Next is Simic. I put Simic in D tier. Elk put Simic in C tier, and Snail put Simic in D tier as well.
Yeah, Simic is one where I feel like it could be interesting, but in practice it's just very generic. It traffics in the core resources of the game, cards and mana, and then it just ends up a lot of times slow and battle cruisery. Like, I wish it had more panache. I wish it had more punch. I wish it, more aggression.
Yeah, for me, Simic is the number one Dirtle Fest commander colors. Very hard for it to win. I would feel bad putting it below C tier, however, because I do have like a lot of cards that are in Simic. I want the color combo to be better. The one that comes to mind is Kinesos, Priest of Thassa, this like giant sea monster top deck manipulation. This is what I want to see out of Simic. I don't want to see any more value engines that churn and are boring. Simic has been getting better recently, with the one Kian. Kian gives your spells flash. Non-creatures, if her power is is odd or even. What's the exact wording? I need to read it. Kian Corrupted Memory is an example of a Simic card that I think really shines in the recent way that Simic has been getting interesting. If her power is even, you may cast non-creature spells as though they had flash, and if the power is odd, you may cast creature spells as though they had flash. So you swap between creature and non-creature, and whenever you draw a card, you put a +1/+1 counter on her, so she keeps like going back and forth. I'm casting creatures with flash, I'm casting non-creatures with flash. It's really interesting. There's a lot of really cool one-off commanders like that, but you've heard me say it many times. It's still true here. Exception, not the rule. Simic is full of just like such boring cards that just, like Snail said, traffic in the essential resources of the game and Dirtle.
Yeah, I think Snail's on point here. It's just too much mana, too many cards. Most of the times when I see Simic at the table, if it gets to turn 6 and they're not already at 10 life, they probably won the game. It's too easy for the Simic player to like sneak under the radar and just steamroll any casual table. And I think that's such a boring play pattern. It happens all the time. Okay, wait, that's all the 2-color combos, so it should be faster now.
Yeah, I have fewer thoughts on the 3-color combos than the 2.
There's like maybe like 2 3-color combos that I actually have like a lot to say about.
Oh, I just meant like there's less 3-color combos.
No, there's the same amount.
Is it also 10?
It's 10.
That's crazy. Who made the 10th one?
Huh?
There's 5 colors, so for every 2-color combo, there's a 3-color combo with the other 3 colors.
Has it always been like that? Moving on to Esper. I have Esper in B tier, Elk has Esper in B tier, and Snail has Esper in A tier.
Yes. Esper is lovely. A big thing with me for 3-color combos is do they improve on the 2-color identities? And I find that across the board, Esper does. I think adding black to Azorius is cool. Adding white to Dimir is cool. And adding blue to Orzhov is super cool. So I think, you take kind of the more kind of punchy life total based combos of white and black and add blue to them to kind of temper it and add more depth. And I think there's a lot of cool stuff there. And I think there's a lot of the play paths end up being artifacts or flicker, but I think you can go a lot deeper than that. And there's a whole lot you can do in these 3 colors. And they feel very cohesive. They feel like a cohesive whole. They don't just feel like color soup.
Yeah, I have mine at B. I have very similar 3-color ranking philosophy to Snail here, is that do these colors feel like they stand out versus the 2-color pairs that make them up? And yeah, Esper's one of those. I like especially the all the play that Snail listed, but also white-black, lots of great graveyard synergy in Orzhov. But blue with the self-mill, like the Hedron Crab targeting yourself. Oh my goodness. Like, it's just so nice. It actually rounds out the room perfectly, these 3 colors together. And I respect it for that. That being said, I don't think Wet Orzhov or Bright Dimir is all that interesting per se, but the play patterns that are produced, they are varied enough from the 2 colors that I like it. I like that, it adds a little bit more depth.
I really like Orzhov. I think there's a lot of cool commanders. I think there's a lot of great themes, a lot of, unique things you can do here. It's just a little too all-encompassing. You can kind of do anything and everything, and that makes a lot of Orzhov decks kind of feel samey in the sense that they don't have any weaknesses that they have to try and shore up, other than I guess not being in green.
Esper does kind of have it all on the interaction front, so I can get having a little bit of beef with that.
Next is Grixis, and if you saw my 2-color combos, you'll find that Grixis is my favorite color combination in the game. Green's on my mind. So I have it at S tier. Elk has Grixis at C tier, and Snail has Grixis in C tier as well.
Yeah, I don't know. So one of my first constructed decks that really gelled with me was a Grixis deck. It was a standard Grixis control deck, and so I think in principle I love the color combo. I love the kind of instant sorceries of Izzet paired with kind of the dark black addition of kind of removal and some more draw options and stuff like that. In EDH, it doesn't feel as interesting to me. I think a lot of times it ends up being like wheels. And then I think a lot of other times it ends up feeling a little bit color soup, which is the worst sin a color identity can commit to me. I think that particular pairing of colors just has a little bit too much going on to me. It's too easy to do too many things. So for that reason, I don't love it, and I don't find it to have a clear enough identity.
Yeah, for me, Grixis feels an awful lot like Black Izzet, and not a lot like Dimir with red or Rakdos with blue, right? It is Black Izzet, right? And that feels like kind of a waste, in my opinion. And there's also just a lot of theft in Grixis, which no problem if that's your thing, but theft is consistently the most underwhelming archetype in EDH because of how people lose the game. So kind of a bummer there too.
Well, that makes it like an interesting win con because you have to attack someone that you don't. This is another podcast. Grixis is the coolest color combination. you can. I get what you're saying about like wheels, and I think a lot of people are very like Nekusar pilled when it comes to Grixis. Nekusar's fine, it's whatever. He's a wheel deck, not very interesting. But there is artifacts, spellslinger, um, pirates, just general theft. There is an equipment commander. There's a lot of these like different ways to build these things as well. Like Ashnod the Uncaring and Mishra are different artifact commanders, and Hello the Painter and Kess are very different spellslinger decks. And there's like when you go back to some of the classic commanders, some of the old school ones, there's a lot of cool stuff in here. Mishra Artificer Prodigy is so wacky and weird in Commander. Thraximunder. If somebody shows up and they're playing Thraximunder against me and they're like, hey, it's not zombies, I'm so hyped. It's just like it's one of like the most commanderiest cards to me. It's just like this big dumb creature in not a creature color combination, which makes it feel so weird and different for the rest of like Grixis. And then additionally, even though we're in three colors, these are the three worst colors at dealing with enchantments, which still makes this color combination feel like it has some sort of like weakness, which a lot of other three color pairs don't. And because of that, I just think Grixis is so cool. I love Grixis so much.
See, I definitely get the idea that it gives it some sort of weakness, but I think when you're at three colors, you'll find your way to enchantment removal because all three colors have like red and black each have a couple spells that can target enchantments, and then blue has counter spells and bounce spells. So like I feel like it doesn't end up actually feeling like a weakness in practice unless you're dealing with like a heavy enchantment deck and you didn't really load up.
Nothing a Cyclonic Rift can't fix.
But bouncing an enchantment and countering on the way down is significantly less efficient than just exiling it with an Orzhov card, you know?
Yeah, it is a weakness. It's just not a particularly like potent weakness. Which I guess when you're in three color, yeah, no weakness is going to be that potent.
Exactly. Yeah. No three color combination is actually like a weak. If this was a power rankings, no three color combination would be in a lower tier. They're all very powerful. So moving on to Jund. I have put Jund in A tier. Elk has put Jund in C tier. And Snail put Jund in also C tier.
Jund feels like green Rakdos. It feels like Rakdos just does everything Jund does, but cooler. That's literally the end of my thought. It's like Jund is sack, and it's sack, and there's some lands decks that are peppered in throughout there that are the exception to the Rakdos forced combat, treasures, etc.
I feel kind of similar. I look at Jund and I'm like, why did you put green on my Rakdos? It was doing perfectly fine already. I think there are plenty of cool Jund commanders, and I think there are plenty of cool things that the color pair can do, but it doesn't feel like an upgrade on the individual colors particularly. So for that reason, I can't give it all that much respect.
I don't know what you guys are smoking. There's so many wacky, unique Jund commanders that are Jund specific, you know? Like, don't get me wrong, I love Rakdos. I think I like it more because it is a weaker color combination because it doesn't have green. But like Thantis the Warweaver, Yolruk the Scorch Thrash, is that what it is?
Is that the Mana Burn one?
That's the Mana Burn one. Vazi Keen Negotiator. These are all like really weird cards that there's not really, especially Vazi and Yarlock. There's not too Yarlock. No, it's UR. There's not too many other commanders that do what they do, and I mean there's not that many Jund commanders in general. So like, there's a couple of like really unique ones, and I think that makes Jund pretty
light
cool.
Pushback. Thantis is just Cardor Doomscourge wearing a green hat, right? Like,
no, because they can attack you. Right?
They
so
can.
You have to play
you have a
5/5
that gets bigger when you get attacked, right? They can attack you.
Moving on to Naya. In Naya, I have B tier. Elk has D tier.
Wow.
And Snail has... Yeah, I know, right? I was actually really surprised by that. And Snail also has B tier.
I'm surprised by the D tier just because I don't have all that strong of feelings about Naya. I think that I think the color pairing, it's solid. You've got it in some different kind of creature creature-based colors. It's kind of the mid-range color identity. And I think adding white to Gruul is kind of fun. I think adding green to Boros is kind of fun. I think adding red to Selesnya, red to Selesnya is awesome. I hate Selesnya, so yeah, I think Naya works for me. It's not amazing, but it's fun enough.
Yeah, I agree. I think adding red to Selesnya makes it so much more interesting. They just have like cooler token commanders here, but then there's also more land stuff, and then some of the like face down creature matters things are also pretty cool. And I think yeah, Naya's pretty neat. It's not amazing, but it's cool.
Well, I do agree that Murders at Karlov Manor giving them a bit of a morph theme, kind of interesting. I think overall, the fact that Naya doesn't have anything strong to it besides just being the mid-range colors or being, the creature colors or I don't know. I find it hard to be impressed with Naya. There is one exception to this rule, like any other color. Cards like Rian, oh my gosh. Rian, Angel of Rebirth, I love. I want to make that card work so bad. It's Liesa, but only for multicolor creatures. She did it first.
Next is Bant. I gave Bant a C tier, and I'll say this is bottom of C, like borderline D tier for me. Elk gave Bant a C tier as well, and Snail gave Bant a B tier.
Yeah. So Bant is interesting because the three two-color identities that make it up are my least favorite, hands down, of the two-color identities. And I think Bant is an improvement on all three. I think adding blue to Selesnya makes it more interesting. I think adding white to Simic makes it way more interesting. And I think adding green to Azorius absolutely makes it more interesting. So I think there's some fun political things there. I think there's some fun, some fun counter space things there with a little bit more dimension than you would get in just something like Selesnya. It's nothing amazing, but I think there's enough there. It's interesting to me.
Yeah, if you want to build an Azorius Flicker deck, may I recommend Bant as your Flicker deck instead? It feels like there's a lot more engines for this sort of stuff. There's a lot more finishers for this sort of stuff in Bant, and I feel like overall I would rather be playing a Bant deck than any of the constituent parts of a Bant deck. So yeah, I agree with Snail's take here that this is a significant improvement over the two colors that make it up.
My issue with Bant is a lot of the commanders are kind of generic-y, value-y sort of stuff, like drawing cards, ramping, and they're not super interesting. And then also the color combination is so powerful as well. Simic is already like ridiculously good, and then adding more options to Simic is like, it gives it so many more avenues. And my other problem is like, Azorius is a spell slingery color. Simic is a spell slingery color. Where are the Bant Spellslinger commanders? There's like kind of none, which sort of disappoints me.
Hey, Bumbleflower.
I kind of wish there was. What was that?
Bumbleflower.
May I interest you in Catilda and Lier?
Yeah, Catilda and Lier is like kind of interesting. I just wish there was more in the spells aspect. I don't know. I just feel like that the Azorius part of Bant, which is my favorite part of it, is not shining through in the Bant commanders. Next is Abzan. I have Abzan at B tier. Elk has Abzan at D tier. Really? Yep. And Snail has Abzan at B tier.
I need to say something about Abzan. I'm so sorry, Snail.
Go wild. No, you're welcome to pop
listen,
in first.
Abzan is white Golgari, and it's probably my second least favorite color combo because of that. This Abzan, it just puts white on Golgari. There's not a single commander in Abzan that makes me think like, oh yeah, no, this is like a Simic-y, or not, sorry, Simic-y, sorry, Selesnya-y sort of commander with black in it. Wow. It's like everything in Abzan is already done by Golgari. Almost every commander here, except for like this small infect sub-theme we got during the Phyrexian arc of the Magic story.
I think I want to push back on that. Narsi is very Selesnya plus black, right? It's an Enchantress commander, but it has to do with sacrificing.
Yeah, like once again, every color combo has their little exceptions, and I agree, Narsi's cool.
With 3-color commanders, there aren't nearly as many options, so I feel like the single exceptions do, maybe they have a little bit more weight. But yeah, I do agree. That is, it just
Also,
happens to be
fun
one,
mini
but
game.
I don't know.
Go ahead, Scryfall ID equals Abzan is :commander game :paper minus Oracle text graveyard. It's gonna be like you have like 3 commanders or something.
I think the identity has potential in principle, and I think there are some decent commanders for it. But yeah, I think it does end up being white Golgari a lot of the time. Sometimes even black Selesnya, like with Onyxia, where I think I'd really rather it be green Orsov. That's what I want the identity to be. I want it to be kind of a greater focus on kind of dorks and life, life gain, life loss. And it too often ends up just being kind of generic graveyard stuff.
Shoutouts to Doran though, love that guy. Doran the Siege Tower. Yeah, oh man,
Love a good siege tower.
Abzan's fun. It's neat. I have an Abzan deck in the mail right now that I will be building and eventually making a video on. So excited about that. I think Abzan's cool. There's fun commanders. I like Narcy. I like Doran. They're cool. Bilbo's funny. That's all I have to say. Next is Jeskai. I have Jeskai at A tier. Elk also has Jeskai at A tier. And Snail also has Jeskai at A tier.
is this our first agreement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think white is, to me, white. I'm gonna say something controversial to Khan, but to me, white is something that Izzet is missing. So I think that adding white to Izzet takes it to a perfect color identity to me. Love it.
Everything about Jeskai is great. There's a great depth of commanders. There you can take it in a creature or spell focus. It cares about all different permanent types because of that sort of white backing in there. It's amazing. I think Jeskai is like probably, at least for me, like top 2, top 3 color pairings.
I love Jeskai. I think it does so many different things, and everything that it does feels like it's a Jeskai thing. It does Spellslinger in a Jeskai way. It does artifacts in a Jeskai way. It does tokens or typal decks or politics in a very Jeskai way. And I don't know, I just got, I'll say a snail-coated thing here. It's got good vibes. I like Jeskai a lot. So, yeah, A's all around. Next is Sultai. I have Sultai at D tier. Elk has Sultai at B tier. And Snail has Sultai at B tier.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thing with Sultai is I think it feels like an improvement over Simic, definitely. And I think adding blue to Golgari also adds some nice depth to that color identity as well. So I think it's decent. There's some interesting commanders. My only kind of beef with it might be that it feels a little bit color soup. And that's entirely a vibes-based thing, but it just feels like it's a little bit too broad in what it's doing a lot of the time.
Yeah, I feel like putting the 3 self-mill colors together is just like, yeah, you get some cool packages out of it. I'm happy to see like Tassiger, Sidisi, stuff like this. This feels like, like really like the foundation of like graveyard, even more than Abzan. Abzan feels like a bit of an aberration graveyard 3-color combo. When I think of a 3-color combo and I think the graveyard, I think Sultai value. I like it. That's about it. I just like my graveyard decks, and Sultai's there, and Sultai does graveyard in a few different ways. Happy to see it.
I think this is just like Simic, but you get to do more things with your graveyard. It's very value town. It's very just like powerful stuff. There's no Simic commander that I'd find particularly interesting. And even a lot of the partner pairs are not too fascinating either, so it's just a miss from me overall. Just not interested in any of these cards.
Shoutouts to Tatsunari. Love that guy.
Okay, moving on to Mardu. I have Mardu at A tier. Elk has Mardu at S tier. And Snail has Mardu at A tier.
We love Mardu here.
Yeah, it's awesome.
You want to start out?
This is why I docked Rakdos a couple points. I think Mardu's Rakdos, but better. I really do fundamentally enjoy Mardu more than Rakdos often. I like Raid. I like that it pushes the game forward. I like the aggression. And I feel like it does it in a more creature-heavy way where like Rakdos kind of falters, the white sort of brings the red and black together for me. There was a point in time where I had 4 Mardu decks in paper at the same exact time. That's how much I love this color combo. It might be my favorite color combo.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I don't agree. I'm a Rakdos ride or die boy, but I get it. I think that Rakdos feels complete. However, I think adding white isn't unwanted. I think that pairing of those 3 colors is great. It's like the aggressive like life total, life loss color identity, and I love that about it. Just small dudes getting in for damage, making them life totals go down, and yeah, it's just got a good range of stuff within that, and I love that about it.
I like Mardu as well. I'm a big Rakdos fan, so adding white is still going to be right up my alley. My problem is it then removes one of the restrictions from Rakdos. I feel like you can kind of deal with any permanent too easily. And my other thing that's really limiting it from being S tier to me is there isn't a good enchantment commander in these color combos, because I think it'd be really fun to have that.
Gen.
Notice I said Gen. No. Notice I said good. I know Gen exists. This card is terrible. This is not good.
Gen's fun.
Yeah. Gen can be a little clunky. I agree. I do.
It's phenomenally
let me say,
clunky. I've played so many
do like
iterations.
Gen a lot, and I think you are sleeping on like Vile Smasher Arden auras to like move curses around. That's a really good enchantment deck, and I'm not even one for partners particularly. So, yeah, no. Anyway, I agree that adding white to Rakdos does make it a little bit easier to remove things, but any color combo that uses the combat step to win the game, I have a hard time hating. So
Okay, last 3 color combination is Teamer, which I have in C tier. Elk has Teamer in
this is my
D
least favorite
tier.
color combo.
Oh, okay. And Snail has Teamer in C tier as well.
I could even be convinced to go up to B tier on Teamer.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's interesting, and I think a lot of times it does tend to be a little bit kind of battle cruisery, a little bit kind of, the worst parts of Simic and Gruul. But at the same time, I think adding red to Simic, I think also, if I think about it as red Simic, it seems a lot more interesting. I think you get a lot of interesting sort of value plays. There's a lot of interesting stuff with casting outside of hand in that color identity. I like Cascade hesitantly, and I think the Cascade stuff in the color identity can be kind of fun, although if people just go all in on, big creature slam on the board, that might get boring after some number of games. But yeah, I want to like Teamer, and I'm open to liking Teamer more than I do currently.
For me, my strong reaction with Teamer is just like, this doesn't do anything that Gruul, Izzet, or Simic does. That, like, I don't know. Like, it doesn't do anything different than these 3 color combinations, in my opinion. And it's just like, all right, great. So what do we have in the end there? Not a lot. I don't know. Like, there's none of the commanders were really that interesting to me. Scrolling through, it's really hard to build a Teamer deck for me that doesn't end up soup. It feels like the soupiest of the 3 color pairs.
Yeah, I agree with Elk mostly. I think there's a lot of, even my beautiful baby boy Loot is just like a value commander. There's a lot of that type of stuff in Teamer, which is like, that's what I struggle with. I will say there's a few interesting, very unique commanders. Flubs the Fool, Gimbal, and that's what saves it from a D tier for me, is there's a couple of really unique cards.
Yeah, I think they're definitely trying for interesting designs with this color, at least. You even have the Riku of Many Paths going for the modal spells, which I haven't played against that. I don't know what it's like, but it seems interesting.
So for 4 colors, we have all put every 4 color combination in D tier, other than Snail, who put Sans Blue into C tier.
Yeah, they're all pretty soupy. I think Sans Blue is a little bit less soupy. I can't fully justify why I feel that way, but I don't know. Blue just feels like an inherently kind of risks soup as a color, just because I don't really have a good explanation for this. It's just vibes. It's just vibes, man.
Yeah, shout out to like Ink Treader Nephilim color combo pair. The no black for having the most like varied of the 4 colors. But at the end of the day, 4 colors just feels like, if you're here, why not just go for 5, unless you like particularly like Saskia the Unwielding or the partner like combo you're playing, right? Like, I don't know, just go for 5 at this point.
Agreed. It does a little bit too much of everything, and the commanders are not super interesting. And I hate 4-color partner pairs for CEDH. It's so lame. Last but not least, 5 colors. I put Wooburg in B tier, and both of you put Wooburg in D tier.
The soup calls. Yeah, I think there are interesting designs to be had in Wooburg. I just feel like Wizards of the Coast has not really sunken their teeth into that potential. I see things like Niv Mizzet Supreme, where it's like, ooh, each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard that's exactly 2 colors has Jumpstart. This is an interesting thing that gets me start thinking, because it's broad enough that there's a lot of different directions you can take this, but it's narrow enough that you have some deck building restriction. For example, Tom Bombadil, you just put all this good sagas in that deck. Dragon, you just put all the good dragons in that deck. Joe to the Unifier, you just put all the good legendary creatures in that deck. Kenrith, bleh, yuck. You just put the good cards in that deck. Commanders in 5 colors need a restriction that is tight enough to be interesting to build around, but not so tight that you get pigeonholed. That is where 5 colors can be interesting.
Yeah, I think that the Niv Mizzets are the maybe one reason, well, the one saving grace of 5-color, and the way that I think Wizards should push forward in the future with more designing commanders for it.
Yeah, I put it in B tier because, so I agree with you that a lot of these are very soupy, boring decks. Like, honestly, like the top 5 most popular 5-color legends on EDH Rec are some of my least favorite commanders of all time. Honestly, the top 10 is like, eh. But one thing that I like is there's a few commanders like Niv Mizzet Supreme, like you said, or Niv Mizzet Reborn as well. Jared Carthalion, Cody, who like have some unique restrictions or do things in an interesting way, such that I think they're cool cards to build around. And then one of my favorite things about 5-color is when I see someone with one of these strange 5-color commanders and they're using it for like a really specific purpose. So Kyodai, Soul of Kamigawa, is an example of this. ETBs can like protect something, gives it indestructible. If you're playing some wacky hidden commander in the 99 and it's 5 colors built around this other wacky card, and you're just using your commander as like a protection spell for that one card, those are some of the most EDH decks in my opinion. Like, that's the point of the format, is to build a kooky, crazy deck, and 5 colors oftentimes is the one that lets you do that. So even though I don't like Kenrith, I have a friend of mine that has a Kenrith life swap deck, and it cannot produce blue mana. Like, the whole deck has no way to make blue mana. There's no command tower or anything. And that's cool. I think his deck's really interesting. And if you're like really into like brewing something very out of the box, a lot of times you need a lot of colors, and 5 colors enables that, and those are some of my favorite decks to see in the wild. So I gotta give it a B tier for everybody doing something wacky. Should I do? You guys have any closing thoughts, or should I move to like a conclusion?
I thought of a joke.
What's the joke?
Go ahead.
The person who's doing the wackiest thing is the Dragon player who wanders up to your table and tells you that their deck is the wackiest thing you've ever seen. I remember you mentioned that on the recent episode.
This is like the 3rd time we clowned on Dragon players in this podcast.
So they can handle it.
Yeah, this podcast is very long. No question zone this week, but please leave us some questions to answer next time with the question zone before it, and we'll also be answering question zone questions from last episode in that podcast as well. Hooray!
Yes, thank you very much for listening to this long podcast.
Yeah, it's very long.